change. Last year, our operating budget was about 32 million. So the operating budget is going down for lots of reasons that we talked about, primarily the grants. Out of that 30 million, 15 million goes to instruction in general. Those activities within the college, okay? That's most of the pie, that's about half the pie. The other area that and that makes up 51% of the operating budget, so half the pie. The next area that we expend money, we spend about 3% of that 30 million on our auxiliaries. That's about 850,000 almost. And our auxiliaries, just to tell you what's in there, is really our bookstore, our food service, and there might be a couple other small activities in there that I'm not thinking about off the top of my head, but that's primarily what our auxiliaries is made of. Renewal and replacement is about 2% of our operating budget, and again, for the newer folks on the board, renewal and replacement, we have building renewal and replacement monies, and those monies are to be used for maintaining our facilities. We have equipment renewal and replacement, ER&R. ER&R was the first one. ER&R is the second one. It's equipment renewal and replacement. And these are the amounts that I was telling you earlier that we are required by higher ed to maintain a level of FY12, and that's why it forces me to budget a lot more, and it takes away from my ability to use those monies somewhere else. But that's what these monies are. The ER&R is used primarily for equipment-related expenditures for the institution. A compressor could go out, a heater, a cooler, things like that. Anything that is equipment in nature, we would use ER&R for. Now, in the old days, which wasn't very long ago, it was about 2 or 3 years ago, we used to use ER&R also for equipment for computer equipment in the classroom, software, things like that. But in setting up the internal services operating budget, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute, we said we need to start building their own pot of money, because what was happening was we would have some in the budget for ER&R for software or computers, and then we'd blow a compressor, or we'd have a big piece of equipment, because these are expensive pieces when they go out, and then we couldn't use money for stuff like that. So we said, we need to have our own pool for them, and we've transitioned that since last year in our operating budget. The next area is bonds. Bonds makes up about 10% of our operating budget, and so for next year we're talking about the money that's related to finishing some of the remods on this southern portion of the building, and this is north. I'm going to say this is the southern half. And then it's our infrastructure money that we received voter approval for in November. So that's what that money is. Indirect is less than 1%. Indirect is monies that we get to budget on the operating side that comes from grants. So when we manage grants, federal grants primarily, but even state grants might give us some administrative overhead. These are primarily from federal grants. We get what's called an indirect amount. It might be 3%, might be 10%. It depends on the grant. In some cases, they don't allow any indirect at all, but that's what that is. Public service grants, this is really having to do with our SBDC center. I don't know how many of you are familiar with that, but we have a small business development center here on campus. This is really the monies that they get in-house built too for their operations. We do subsidize them to some degree in terms of we give them space, we give them computer services, phone services, and we started memorializing that in our operating budget last year because the head of the programs for the state wanted to see a contribution on the part of the institution, and so we said, well, we are contributing, but they weren't seeing it on the book, so we said, okay, we'll memorialize that and we'll charge them. And then it's just a paper transaction, but we do contribute, and now we put that in the operating budget. The other area is athletics. Athletics makes up about 2% of the operating budget, that's $653,000. Student organizations is a little less than 1%. So this is where the activity fee goes. This is where folks manage all the like that go on student life related. 1% of it is state private grants, state and private grants. Our federal grants make up 14% of our operating budget. When I first got here, we were pretty close to about 50-50. So we've come down on the grants quite a bit. But the long and short of it is, it's $4 million right now, and 14% of our operating budget. State financial aid, we have to contribute a certain amount to financial aid for students. That makes up 3%, or about $800,000 in our operating budget. Federal financial aid in the budget is 13%. Federal dollars, the tail dollars, things that Rick was talking about earlier. So that's our total operating budget and how it is parceled out in the operations of the college. Of that 30 million, 20 million is unrestricted, and these dollars, again, I won't go through a lot of detail on it, but what I do want to mention is unrestricted. When I was talking about hole number 2, how we started in the hole, $1,860,000, it's this pot of money that is in the negative when you look at the unrestricted dollars for the institution. And this is where, again, over time, we have to get ourselves into a position of a positive fund balance. I think that this coming year, again, I'm going to say this again because I feel comfortable saying this, that if the bottom doesn't fall out from us, we'll be positioning ourselves to finally get on that path, because we'll have written everything off. We think that there aren't any real big dollar surprises that might hit us. Now, that doesn't mean that they won't, right? There could be a lawsuit or a satellite could fall in one of our buildings and we have to fix it or something. So, but that's kind of where we're at. Over the 30 million, 2/3 of it is unrestricted. On the restricted revenues, we have about 9.4 million in the operating budget. And all the restricted revenues, if you look there, really are almost financial aid related, financial aid and of course grants. The restriction really comes with those types of grants, or those types of funding sources, in how you can use them. So we always have to be careful that we live within the legal requirements of those monies, and that's why they're called restricted. Next one is transfers. Within our operating budget, we have transfers in and out. $1,176,000 is what we take out of our pot of operating money to parcel out to the different activities. Internal services is about 90,000. They do collect fees, so we don't have to transfer as much to them. Federal work studies is about 50,000. Auxiliaries and student organizations is 193. And athletics is 247. Scholarships 60%. So you can see the amounts here. The BR&R and ER&R amounts 382,000. Remember I was talking about we have to transfer those out, and then those are the two amounts right here at the bottom corner. If you're looking at your sheet on the bottom right hand corner, that I'm telling you that we're going to have to pull back on spending in those areas so that we can meet our operational needs and on the main campus for maintenance and utilities. So this gives you then an idea of where $1 million of this money is going to. In terms of FTE positions, we're in this operating budget looking at 209, almost 210 FTE. And again, for those of you that aren't familiar with the term, an FTE is a full-time equivalent position. And by definition, if an individual works 40 hours a week, one FTE, a full-time equivalent body within our budget. If they only work 20 hours a week, you do the math, 20 divided by 40, it's half an FTE, okay? So we've got, in total, with full-time, part-time people, 209.95 FTE. And then you can see in here that the lion's share of those positions are in IMG, our instruction in general areas. And then I also have the other areas and the percentage of FTE positions that they have. When you look at our FTE, though, going back a few years, I think when I first got here, we were at 300. I think last year, the year before, we were at 285. I mean, it's continued to drop. So when I